Metro Exodus is a game I have been eagerly awaiting for quite a while now. I'm a huge fan of post-apocalyptic games, and the Metro series is one of my favorite ones. I've read the books the games are based on and played every game so far on its hardest difficulty. I'm only mentioning this because I usually play games on the normal difficulty. The only reason for which I make the game harder is because it serves to improve my immersion. In a post-apocalyptic setting, you are an underdog. Extreme danger seems appropriate, and that is why games such as Resident Evil and Metro are best played on those settings. I'm not a particularly gifted player, so to me these difficulties pose a huge challenge, but when there is a great story guiding me, I usually don't get frustrated. In this review I will be looking at the game, but also drawing comparison with the last book named Metro 2035 by Dmitry Gluchovsky. The reason for that is that Metro Exodus has a story which is based on that book. I assume not everyone has actually read the book, so I will give you a short summary of what happens there. Please be aware that playing the game will spoil the book and its ending for you within its first 30 minutes of gameplay. Due to this, I will actually spoil some things from the book here as well, including that ending that I've mentioned. If you want to read the book first, you should not start Metro Exodus at all and not watch this review either, at least not before you've read the book. I would also actually advise you that you should not watch any of the trailers either, so as you can see it's extremely probable that this book's ending has been spoiled for you in any of these cases already. In the book, Artyom is a broken man. He has fallen from grace, is not part of the Spartans, is disliked by his father-in-law Colonel Miller, and lives with his wife Anna on a station where she is a mushroom farmer and he is a good-for-nothing deadbeat husband. His wife and him are estranged and their marriage is falling apart fast. Artyom keeps going to the surface and getting irradiated on his attempts to contact the outside world. He believes there are more survivors in places with no radiation. Places worth going to so that people can finally live a dignified life on the Earth's surface. Sadly, nobody else believes him, but he pushes on. A lot of things happen in the book which I will skip here, but what's most important is that Artyom discovers that there are jammers in Moscow, which block any communication with anyone outside the city. He also discovers that there are very powerful people living like kings, enjoying nice food and excellent healthcare, all of this at the expense of the people in the metro who suffer. Outsiders are executed as soon as they enter Moscow, and the whole idea is to lie to the people of the metro and keep them oblivious to the fact that there are in fact many places where one can live without being irradiated. There are also people living there, as a matter of fact. A few high-profile people are told that the war goes on and that this charade is important because the only thing keeping Moscow safe right now is the fact that the enemies of Moscow have no idea that the survivors in the metro exist. More things happen and Artyom manages to make amends with his estranged wife Anna, and the book ends with them getting in a car and leaving Moscow searching for a better life. In the game, we literally start with Artyom coming into the metro tunnels from the surface. He has been on another expedition of his, trying to contact someone outside. He gets attacked by mutants and is saved by his comrades. Not long after this, he and his wife, Anna, go together to the surface for the same reason again. They find nothing on the radio, and as they are going back, they see an active train. Shortly after this, they are actually stopped by a vehicle and captured. Within the vehicle, they see a woman and a young man who claim to be from outside of Moscow, and that one can breathe the air there. These two new characters get shot shortly after that. A few other things happen, and Anna and Artyom find out that there are jammers in the city, preventing any communication with what's outside of it. They find out that Anna's father, the leader of the Spartans known as Colonel Miller, knew of this all along. He and his men get involved and save Anna and Artyom from the Hansa soldiers who keep them captive. They are assisted by an engineer from Hansa who helps them steal a train, and they leave Moscow with that train. As you can see, within the first half an hour of gameplay, the book's biggest reveals are all exposed and the game quickly deviates from the source material. Not only that, but in the game Artyom is still a member of the Spartans. Colonel Miller seems to not be a big fan of his, but in the book he straight out absolutely hates Artyom. His wife Anna is still madly in love with him in the game, and as the game progresses you will realize that Artyom loves her just as much. These changes are deliberate and make for an important foundation for the game's story. But as someone who at that point was only 30 minutes in the game, I was worried at first, fearing that the game's story will end up being lazy and boring. After all, our protagonist suffers greatly in the book. He has very few friends at this point. He does not really love his wife as much as he did before. He even falls in love with another woman in the book. he's rejected by the Metro society, and he's pretty much lost everything that he had before that. In the game there is almost none of that. Artyom is loved and respected here, so I had good reason to suspect that the game story would be weak. But I was wrong. The game's story starts slowly and takes many hours to unfold properly. The player is made to believe that it's about finding a new place to live in, a clean place without radiation. But if you play the game the way it is meant to be played and listen to all the interactions between the other characters and to those they have with Artyom himself, you will inevitably begin to grow attached to them. They're all quite unique and very likable. I have to applaud 4A Games for the great work they've done here. You never notice how each character becomes important to you and how you've developed somewhat of a relationship with them. This is achieved throughout hours of extra conversations that were recorded. As you approach these NPCs, they will naturally interact with you and each other. There are no cutscenes here, no prompts to press anything. It's seamless and you can simply walk away if you don't want to spend time doing this. The problem with this is that in order to hear and see everything, you are often supposed to just stand there passively and listen on. At times it's so much that I fear most players will simply move on to the next level and ignore everything. This is also where my biggest criticism comes. Artyom is a silent protagonist. You can hear his voice while he recaps what has happened during the loading screens, but as soon as you are in-game, he will stand there and never respond. This is so stupid and destroys the immersion every time. I have no idea what the developer was thinking with that. I've read people say that this is done so that the player can project himself onto the protagonist, but that's utter nonsense. The vast majority of players are not mute. How are we supposed to look at this mute idiot and think that we are him? There are so many occasions where characters contact Artyom over the radio asking him for some sort of confirmation. At one time, his wife is worried he's injured or even dead and desperately asks him to reply, but the idiot never speaks. Even the game makes fun of that, mentioning how he's a good listener and quiet all the time on several occasions. The real reason this is done is a monetary one. It's so much cheaper to pay one voice actor less, especially if that voice actor would otherwise have the most voice lines of them all due to him being the protagonist. But I mean, come on, this is a AAA title, is this really an appropriate place to save money? But enough about this, I'm sure everyone understands my feelings about it now. Unfortunately, the game has other problems as well. If you want to play it on ultra-wide resolutions, the game does work, but it appears slightly stretched. The game's settings actually lack basic functionality that we're used to seeing in 2019. There wasn't even an option to change my resolution or to switch to windowed mode or any other mode, as a matter of fact. The only way to do that is to change a setting directly into the game's configuration file. The results are mixed, but it works well enough to be playable. Another issue was that playing the game on DirectX 12 caused it to constantly crash for me. I had to go down to DirectX 11. Then it was actually stable, and it wasn't a driver issue. I updated my driver specifically for this. I've recorded the materials for this review in 21:9 with field of view set to 75 and played it when I was not recording at 32:9 with the same field of view setting. If you want to disable motion blur completely like I did, then you also have to modify the game's configuration file, the same for the field of view setting. Tutorials on how to do that are easily found online, but if you do have problems and need my help, I'll be happy to respond. Just write it in the comments section. Let me just say that this is not how games should be in 2019. I know that it's mostly because everyone develops the games primarily for consoles and they never get too many options there, but that's not an excuse not to add these options when considering the normal PC users. On the other end, I've also found a setting which allowed me to change QuickTime event requirements from having to press the button quickly to having to only hold it. That setting is actually in the game's menu. You don't need to edit any files for that. My keyboard is very grateful for that one, and I would love to see it done more often in pretty much every game that has a QuickTime event planned in it. In terms of gameplay, the game has changed a lot. Since most of your adventure will be out in the open now, it has shifted its focus slightly. In the past, Metro was mostly a scary game. The crowded tunnels were claustrophobic, it was dark, and that darkness was usually your enemy. Now, while in the open, you rarely face darkness as deep as the one in Metro. You will have an open sky above you, and that provides quite a lot of light even at night. The night is advantageous for stealth, and since the ammo is always low, stealth is the way to go in any case. You can sleep to change the time of day, and I found myself playing almost exclusively at night. The game now features 3 medium-sized maps which are all quite open and offer you the option to scavenge materials and attachments for your weapons and other gadgets. Just as it was in the last Metro game, you will be modifying your weapons with attachments and just changing them all together, and these modifications are at least as varied as in the previous game, if not even more so. That makes for a very engaging and interesting game mechanic, and it is fun to do. The maps offer points of interest which are not obligatory but help flesh out the story. For me, exploring every part of these maps was a no-brainer, especially because the game offers you a way to holster your weapon. If you approach certain NPCs, they will react in a very different way when approached with a gun pointed at them rather than with a holstered gun. There are also points at which you can choose to spare or kill someone during the story, and this not only influences which of the 2 endings you will get, but also will have more immediate effects during the game. I especially like the fact that the game does not force you to go non-lethal on everyone. Yes, you can perform such takedowns, but killing most opponents does not get you the bad ending as in other games, for example in Dishonored. I am always annoyed when I have to be unrealistically nice just to get the good ending in a game. In my first playthrough, I played the game the way I thought the protagonist would do it and got the best ending, well actually good ending, it's the only good one, although many enemies were killed without remorse by my Artyom. So that's a good thing in my book. The thing I dislike is that the bullets are no longer a currency in this game. If you remember in the previous games, you would use bullets to fire at stuff, but you would also use them to pay for things when you were buying stuff. You gather materials, and from those you can craft bullets in this game, as well as other things. As a matter of fact, there are no shops of any kind in Metro Exodus. I dislike that because the idea of literally shooting away your money was a great one in the previous games. Using bullets as payment was a key part in the previous games, and while our heroes are now no longer in the Metro, it is strange that no currency exists whatsoever. People will always have a way of paying for goods, so that's kind of unrealistic. Another thing I wish to criticize is that you have a main and side quests in the game. The main ones are almost always quite urgent, so in order to do the side quests, you have to ignore the urgency of the main quest. This same counts for the exploration, as a matter of fact. If you want to explore, you gotta do it while there's some main quest that's waiting for you. You have an important quest, but you are also asked to look for a teddy bear for a little girl, for example. I find that especially bad because these side quests are apparently very important factors when it comes to defining which ending you will get at the end of the game. Ignore them and you are much more likely to end up watching a bad ending. And don't get me wrong, I actually like the idea of having side quests, and I like to be left to explore as much as I want. I'm just not a fan of the fact that if you don't do these things, the side quests or the exploration, you actually will most likely get the bad ending. And that is negative because you are punishing the player for not playing the game in a way that is contrary to what the story demands. If something urgent is happening, if you want to immerse yourself and pretend you are Artyom, who is by the way mute, but I'm not even gonna go there again, then you would actually go for the urgent task rather than looking for a teddy bear for a little girl in the wasteland. Well, wasteland might be exaggerating, the place is not so bad at this point, but you get my point. It's just that this shouldn't have to carry such burden with itself, that if you don't do these quests you get punished for it. It could just reward you, and in most times, for example, exploration will reward you with some attachment for your weapon or anything like that, some useful gadget, so it is a good incentive for you to do it, and I personally love doing it, but I don't love the fact that had I not done it, I would have been punished for it. Here's a funny example. I've had a case where Artyom is fighting through enemy waves, trying to rescue a captured ally, and although the situation is super urgent, I walk around the cleared room looking for material. So I just cleaned the room of enemies, and now I have to actually, the story wants me to progress to the next room. I'm trying to get to that person I'm trying to save. But what I'm doing is I'm looking around for materials, and this is bad because I actually end up finding hidden materials in the room. This way the game actually rewards me for not playing in a more situation appropriate manner. If you don't follow the story, you're gonna get rewarded. If you play the way that would make more sense in the story point of view, you're not gonna get rewarded. And you don't have to tell me that maybe they left this stuff for someone who is out of ammo and so on. In this particular case, there was no such problem. The enemies drop ammo, the enemies drop materials as well, and even on the hardest difficulty, it's designed so that you can plow through these guys and continue on. It's not easy, but it is made so that it's possible. So that's not the reason why this is there. This is there for people like me who are just looking around, trying to find something hidden, and you want to be rewarded for exploration. And that is a problem I understand very well, because they want to adhere to everybody's needs. But at the same time, I think it's not so good, especially in these very special story missions, but I'm not gonna go deeper into that. Another thing I found myself not liking as much is the water in the game. You will be in situations that demand that you go across a body of water quite often, especially on the first map, but not only there. Only way to do this is via boat. The boats are slow and you are vulnerable while you're in a boat. If there is water, there are monsters within it and they want you dead really badly. Artyom cannot swim either, but luckily falling in the water does not mean immediate death. In most cases you are returned to the shore from which you have fallen into the water. Only once have I managed to jump so far into the water that Artyom actually drowned. I don't know how I did it, but apparently that is designed. If you try to be smart, the game will punish you for it, but it happened only once and I was actually testing it. So normally you would never do this, it made no sense. But you know, it's a good point to make. Now I understand why he cannot actually swim. His equipment is very heavy, he's got, you know, a lot of stuff on him, weapons, his backpack is essentially a small crafting bench. You know, it makes sense from a story perspective, but the problem is there's a lot of water around you, so you are forced to jump in and out of these boats. Now let's talk about the gameplay itself. The difficulty you choose to play at will determine how much stealth you will be using. This is simply due to the fact that on lower difficulties ammunition is plentiful and you can afford to go in guns blazing, while on higher ones you will almost never have enough, so your best option will be stealth. No matter which of the two approaches you choose, the game will always be fun to play. The stealth works very well and there was never a moment when I felt I was seen when I shouldn't have been. The gunplay is equally satisfying. There's a huge variety of weapons due to the fact that you can modify them on the fly. A new game mechanic has been added where your weapons will become dirty depending on how much you use them and in what environments. This has an immediate effect and can cause them to jam and not be able to fire, as well as to simply do significantly less damage and be less accurate. It's a good thing because it forces you to switch between the three weapons you can carry at any times. Not only to switch between them, but you know, by modifying them on the fly you can actually change a weapon into almost a different one. Not almost, you can literally take a handgun, make it into a sniper rifle, which is very cool. Once you're outside of this dangerous situation, you can go to one of your safe houses, place the weapon on an actual workbench and clean it, for resources of course, and once cleaned the weapon will again perform at 100%. Since you have a day and night cycle, you can choose how you wish to play the game on your own. At night there are more mutants. Fighting these is usually not worth it at all, so best approach here is to simply sneak around them as well. During the day you will have a lot more human enemy activity and less stealth options, but for that you won't have as many mutants roaming the landscape, so that's pretty cool. In that case you could, for example, go in guns blazing. For those of us who still miss the narrow levels of the metro tunnels, the game provides such levels in between and within these three larger maps that I have mentioned. This actually works very well and creates a feeling of variety, making it so the player is never bored. I want to now go back to the story again. It's not very original and there were no surprising twists for me in it, but due to the excellent way it was told and the smart and long character development, the story manages to get under the player's skin like very few other games lately. It builds up very slowly and then culminates in an epic ending which will leave the player asking for more while still tying up the loose ends. I'm a huge fan of the Metro books and the games. This is the first time a game in this series has managed to beat the book in terms of entertainment value. Having read the last book is advantageous in order to better understand the plot of the game, but due to the fact that the game deviates so much from it, it's far from necessary. The bottom line is that Metro Exodus is awesome. It has technical problems which indicate to me that it was a bit rushed, but once you get the game working, it works fine from start to finish. I've only encountered a few minor bugs such as floating loot, for example. In my personal opinion, Metro Exodus will probably win a Game of the Year award, and rightfully so. We've waited a very long time for this game, but the waiting was definitely worth it. I can recommend this game without any reservations as long as your computer can handle running it, because its beauty comes at a price, but a fair one. I've played many games that look far worse and were simply much heavier on my CPU and GPU. I hope my review has been informative and entertaining, and I wish to thank you for watching it. Let me know if you agree with me on the topic of the silent protagonist. Is it just me, or are other people equally annoyed by this? Do you think it's more immersive if the character is mute? What about when people ask him to reply on the radio and he's just silent? In any case, I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thanks again and have a great day.